Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Coffee
Hello.
Break Insights.
Yes. So, yeah, just preparing preparing the disclaimer here. Today is May 28th, and we are Lionel Francis and Marianne Cardinaire, and this is our Coffee Break Insights. The content of all our episodes is our opinion and should not be construed as anything else. And all content is protected by copyright. You may not use our content in any way, shape, or form without our joint permission. Um, yes, so let's get started here.
So we have an interesting topic for today: shifting perceptions on life, and that came up because we were doing what we might call, hi Diana, welcome. What we might call our usual business meetings, but that entails going into very deep space to get clarity, to clear ourselves, to move forward for ourselves, because as we move forward, we do, that's about improving our work that we do with our clients. So keeping up is a very important piece for us. But so yeah, that came up, and it was very interesting because we think we have the whole picture of something. And shifting perception is not about just about seeing it from somebody else's point of view. I mean, that's one perception shift we can make. That's a very good. That's a very important one, just to give us another reference point. Hi, Harold, of how we're seeing things, and maybe we're not seeing things completely. So shifting it to another person's point of view is really good. It's really helpful. But this took us to a different place. There's another shift in perception. I have a little hard time saying this today. That's important to take note, and that has to do with the levels of existence of reality. So there are different levels of reality, and ultimately, it's always about getting to that deepest level, that top level, to get to what we can call the absolute truth. And the absolute truth, we've talked about this a little bit before in another episode, but the absolute truth has to do with that truth that applies in all circumstances. And then it's not that below that the other truths are not valid, it's that they're only valid for the level that they work at. So at the human level, there's one level of truth. We get into your truth, my truth, then we move up, but that's another episode. But part of that is shifting perception, and as we move into deeper levels of existence, we start seeing things in a very, very different way, and it starts making sense in the context changes, and then what we're understanding, all of a sudden it's like, okay, that's not at all what I thought it was, kind of thing.
Right.
Any thoughts, any additions to that, Lionel?
Yeah, it's a really good explanation of what perception really is about. And just for all of you, and as always, if you have any questions about this, is a really fascinating topic. Send them in. From my perspective and perception and perspective, that's also interesting, because our perceptions also influence our perspective. So this is really an interesting piece to just mention. But
and vice versa too. Actually, goes both ways.
And the other way around as well. Yeah. So that's an interesting point. And I'm getting to the sense that the whole awakening process is really about constantly changing your perceptions and perspectives about things, the way that you experience them, the way that you see them. So that's the piece that I want to bring in here, because it's not that the actual thing or whatever it is, the event or the circumstance changes, or that you can change it because it happened in linear time, but it's that as you awaken, how you experience it, how you feel it, how you are with it, how you see it, those keep shifting to higher levels, and probably also to those higher truths, because your relationship shifts. So this is a really fundamental piece, because then we move away from the idea that we need to change the thing or the circumstance, but we move inward to change our relationship to the experience of the circumstance. That's one piece that I want to bring in here that stands out for me in my life around this these, and that's why also this episode, shifting the angles of perception. There are really kind of angles of perception that we can look at the same thing from different perspectives, and that depends on the level that you're coming from. So yeah, that's my piece that I wanted to bring. Anything else you want to add to that or mention?
Well, I want to kind of explain that a little bit more detail, because that's always a hard one to get, because I think oftentimes what happens to us is that we have we think we have the global picture, and the way is talked about, and I think I kind of want to say, well, the new age, but science is also like that. We think we have the global picture, and that anything that doesn't fit that, it's like, well, that's nonsense. That's kind of typical in the science field, unfortunately. As I'm reading a book on quantum physics, that comes up a lot. But also it's like it doesn't fit our paradigm of life, and so it doesn't make sense. So it's not correct. And that's an important one to remember, especially I've seen that a lot with the folks that I've known or in the new age business, since I've been kind of put into that field just because of the work that I do for a long time, and so there's a lot of old information that's been around for a long time that people are tapping into, and this is and this from this perspective, this is how everything is, kind of thing. And we've got to. So Diane is bringing up exactly what I'm about to say. It's the piece around filters. So she says the filters we have influence our perception and perspective. Absolutely. So we're right tuned in together here. Yeah, and I think that's a very important thing to remember, is that we have filters. We have a way of looking at it. So one of the very basic levels is the human filter. And so the human filter means that you see everything from the level of the human experience. So that seems kind of like, well, duh, we're humans, yeah, but we're not. We're also spirits. And when we move into a spirit level perspective, it changes drastically. It really changes drastically, or it might be an incremental change kind of thing. So that's a really important piece to remember and to be aware of, and to start paying attention and asking questions about, because it always comes down to asking questions like, well, did I get that? Did I, am I seeing that correctly? So one kind of way that comes to mind to explain it a little bit more deeply for people is like, if you remember when you're back in kindergarten, your perspective of something changes, can be one thing. Your perspective of about girls or boys, the opposite sex was one thing, and then you get into sixth grade, boy, it's a totally different thing. Then you get into, past puberty, it's a completely different dynamic, right? So it's really important to keep that in mind. It's like, okay, for where I'm at now, this is my perspective, and you can really hold on to it, and that's fine. But it's to kind of remember as we grow, because that is an important piece of awakening, of moving, of evolving, of moving into a higher consciousness, which is what we're in the process of doing globally. That we have to look at this a little bit more carefully, because these things will also sink us if we're not shifting when we need to, kind of thing. Any other comments, and thoughts, please post them in, kind of thing.
Yeah, and what I'd like to add to this, what comes up, is I don't really like the word perspective, because it kind of reminds me of, well, perspective it kind of feels like it's a mind level always, like our perspectives are kind of mind generated. So I like the word perception more, which you also mentioned, Diana, in your comment, but it's the perception from the level from which we're kind of perceiving like from that level. So that kind of isn't more accurate. So I wanted to just bring that up. Otherwise, it kind of reminds us of the mind level where our perspectives are just run by our mind. But maybe that's just a technicality. But I kind of feel like perception is better. And then there's different levels. So then, like you said, that was really a good example of going through the ages in kindergarten, and then experiencing like how our life experience changes completely. And that is also influenced, of course, by our hormonal shifts, by our identity shifts, and our states of like being. So it's influenced by something deeper. So maybe that's another piece we can throw into the discussion, is where do these shifts in perspectives or perceptions come from? And a lot of it is as we grow. Yeah, so maybe you can go from there, Marianne, and mention some things that are relevant there.
Well, I just wanted to throw in that, for me, perception and perspectives tie in, so they're both kind of encapsulated together. They both need to take a look at, because how we perceive something then becomes how we is our I can't even get the words right, but it becomes a perspective on how we see things, which becomes a mental mindset. So they do. I think it's not one or the other. I think they absolutely do come in together. So that's really important. But so if we take, maybe we could take an example like of control. I think that's actually the piece that really came up for us. I've seen it in a radically different way when we got to some very deep levels. But if we start at like the human level, and of course with the human level, there's slight variance, because there's from the perspective or perception of a woman, of a man, of a child, of a different race, and the same thing can be very different. But control tends to be seen at the human level. It's like, well, that person is trying to control me. That person, that organization, that group is trying to exerting control over another group through laws. So laws is an example of that, and various things of that nature. Perception influences our perspective. Yes, you're right along with us there, Diana.
Yeah.
And then we shift. Well, there's the spirit level, and so there's kind of, for me, the whole gamut between the human and the spirit level. So there's the non-physical level, and a lot of people tend to think it's like, well, what happens at the human level is not going to happen at that non-physical level with the angels and all that stuff, because, well, and hell yes. It's all I can say. You're going to get, if you're getting controlled at the human level, you're going to get controlled at the spirit level. But then the perspective changes. So how it's being done, so we can look at this group thing. Okay, so there's one group exerting its control, and so we on another group at the human level. And then when we take a look at that control piece from a deeper level, we realize that there are deeper forces at work that are actually controlling the group that's controlling another set of people. So in essence, they're being controlled, and then you start seeing it's like, well, it's not us or them. It's like this is a much deeper level of force that is in place, that comes into play in this thing. So you shift the perspective, the perception, and the understanding of what's really going on and why it's going on. And then it was interesting because, there's, even at spirit level, the way I've described it, there's still this sense of us and them and struggle, and you got to get past that. And once you get beyond that, there won't be this thing. And then we got to extremely deep level, and all of a sudden it was very clear that this is not what we kind of can view at the spirit level as a mechanism for controlling, like a force or mechanism that comes into controlling, that it's an inherent part of existence that needs to be there, because it's something that, in a way you could say, causes an irritation and pushes people to do more, to keep moving forward, to keep wanting to get beyond where they are, because they keep wanting to free themselves, kind of thing. So in seeing it that way, all of a sudden it's like there's this animosity kind of thing. There's this friction kind of thing that it can be perceived and can be experienced at the deeper level, at the lower levels. That's not there, and it's like, oh yeah, of course this is going to happen, and that's it. And so it's more, how do I work with this instead of getting caught up even at spirit level of this duality, of this struggle, of this fight, something that we have to get beyond kind of thing.
Yeah, this is really a great example of, like you were also mentioning, Diana, with these perceptions and how they influence our perspectives to go to that higher level and then have a different relationship, and then our perception changes of our experience of that, for example, issue of control, and then our perspectives change as well in response to that, I would say, and even at the mind level as well later. So it's kind of interesting how that works, but it was a really moving example here.
Yeah, and as you know, when we can shift our perspective, our perception and our perspective, I want to keep both in mind because they're both great. They both tie in.
Yeah.
We can start to see things differently. We can get out of that looking at a certain way. So that's basically looking at it through a filter.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can make use of a situation in a very different way.
Yeah.
So instead of getting really angry and upset and, you know, I'm not going to see this person, it's like, okay, I know this is there. And so how do I make use of this person or this situation to enhance myself, to move up, to awaken, knowing that when I work on myself, then that shifts everything else. That's a mechanism in existence too. That's important to keep in mind.
And I would say that describes what I was mentioning. The core of the awakening process is if you can do that and master that and keep practicing that's for all of you listening as well. That's kind of the essence of practicing mastery here. So we get to the level of mastery of doing that well. And if you did it, that's in essence the awakening process, and the rest of it. But because all the rest of what we experience in life that we don't kind of have control over directly, those become components and kind of influences that don't impact us if we can keep doing the process the way that you just described of working with it rather than against it. So yeah, that's kind of a that's important. So this is
and I think that perspective of something that we can't work with is usually from the lower levels when we haven't really stepped into our power and owning who we are at a very deep level. And when we shift higher, that starts to change the dynamics in the relationship. So and so, you know, what I said just now certainly applies to just the human level, because when we start opening up to, well, okay, as a man, I would see it that way. As a woman, I would see it that way. As a child, I would see it that way. Whatever. Engaging in conversations with people who come from different angles than we do, help to open up and help to give a global picture. And then from that, so it's a global picture. So our awareness grows sideways, kind of thing. And then from there, start asking, it's like, well, is there a deeper truth here? Is there a deeper way of seeing that? Is there a deeper way of understanding this situation or whatever to help us start to break through to a higher level?
Yeah, right. And this is beyond this conversation, but the human level and the stuckness is the word that comes up at that level of things not working the way they want to. That's so much of what we're experiencing now, because in effect at the spirit level, we are collectively even way beyond what the limitations have been that we've experienced at the human level. But if we're not aware of that, and these is our perceptions and our perspectives as well tie into this, then we keep staying stuck trying to work at the human level, and that just isn't working for many things the way that they used to be able to, still work. And then that's what we're seeing playing out now, is that higher solutions need to come in from that higher place, and that's why elevation to those higher frequencies and higher levels is so important. So that kind of ties in, and I wanted to bring that piece in. Maybe we can talk about that.
Very good. So you might want to go back if you're kind of curious for more. Go back and look for our little coffee break insights on truth And I also did write a blog post on that, so you can look on my blog for that on my website, unboundedfree.com. And I don't know if you have anything on there on yours, lionelfrancis.com.
Yeah,
About
not on this
that, but
piece, but yeah,
not yet at least. So thank you all for joining in, stopping by for having some coffee with us and chat. And uh, we'll be back next week. We don't have the schedule. Definitely on Friday next week, and stay tuned for more.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Diane. Bye-bye.
All right. Oh, and Allie, hi. You're being quiet back there. We didn't see you. Thanks for stopping in, everybody.
Yeah.